Hey, what is up guys, it is Phantom here and welcome back to a brand new video everyone. So in this video, I am essentially going to be informing you guys on my basic opinion of Aquila nowadays and why I think the place, honestly, the Aquila as a whole has just become completely useless and just really utter garbage, okay? And there's a few main problems that I have with Aquila right now, and honestly, Kingsall, in my opinion, is in kind of a difficult place with Aquila because, you know, the problem with Aquila, the main problem at least, is it is a bit outdated, okay? If you guys don't remember, it actually was a very long time ago when Aquila came out. It was like 2013 or something like that is when this place first came out. All right, this place first dropped. If you don't know what Aquila is, it is essentially an area. There is the Garden of Hesperides, and in this garden there contains the three main dungeons, home to each of like the three main gods. Okay, there's Mount Olympus, there is Tartarus, there's Atlantia. Atlantia is home to Poseidon, Tartarus is home to Hades, and Olympus is home to Zeus here. Okay, and really what people liked so much about Aquila in the first place and why it was so hype when it first dropped is because of the gear that was actually presented to the players that were willing to do these extra hard dungeons, at least at the time, you know, and who were willing to work for this gear, who were willing to farm for this gear. Okay, let's start out with, honestly, like the only redeeming factor of Aquila, okay? Because I'm going to start with the good things about Aquila first, but overall, I just don't feel too strongly about this place, and I think it hasn't withstood the test of time, and I feel like Aquila as a whole has become really, really obsolete. One could argue that one of the only factors, honestly, that is making Aquila survive right now, at least in terms of like the activity of the players who are playing it, is the dungeon of Mount Olympus. So if you guys don't know, this is the lowest level dungeon in Aquila here. And like I said, let me just mention, okay, right now, just to clear things up a little bit, for those of you who don't know, Aquila really isn't an actual world. Yes, it is a world in the Spiral, but the only content that has ever been released for Aquila in Wiz is the Garden of Hesperides, which just contains all these dungeons. So I just wanted to put it out there. I don't really count it as an actual world. To me, it is more like an area. But anyways, let us, you know, let me show you the pretty much only redeeming part about Aquila, at least in my opinion, or at least one of the very, very few redeeming parts of Aquila, and that is the dungeon of Mount Olympus, the level 30 dungeon, just the lowest level dungeon in Aquila, okay? And the reason why I'd put this as like probably the best thing Aquila has at the moment is because it is probably the least obsolete and useless out of all the dungeons, okay? So this dungeon is for level 30s, like I've said, and the gear honestly can take you quite a while to get. I'm not gonna lie. Okay, the drop rates are not the best for honestly any of this gear around here. They never have been. But if you do manage to get some Zeus gear, honestly, that gear could pretty much carry you till about roughly level 60. And of course, the wand that it gives you from defeating the Ares battle, which is right before the Zeus one, gives you the Sky Iron Hosta. I've heard of people using that one like up until level 90, level 100, maybe even beyond, I'm not really sure, but that one is obviously really, really good, and there aren't too many good replacements for it, and that obviously carries you for a lot of levels. So honestly, that kind of makes, you know, Mount Olympus, I feel like, stand above its two brothers here, right? So Mount Olympus, obviously, you've got Zeus. The Zeus gear is pretty good. It's pretty good. It's definitely not essential, though. It's really, really not essential. Like, you could totally rock Bizarre gear, honestly, until, like, Waterworks if you really wanted to, or just, like, random gear that you got from dungeons, or even pack stuff if you're willing to do that. Literally, there are so many alternatives, and one could argue that even the Zeus gear, which is pretty good and decently worth it to go for, can be kind of steamrolled by the, of course, there is like the Pagoda of Harmony gear or something like that from Shangri-La. That gear is obviously a little bit worse than Zeus gear, but it's for level 25 and up, but I've heard of some people farming for that. And then of course there's also the Barkingham Palace gear, which arguably is also really good as well. So those are two alternatives already that can, you know, make the Zeus gear not as good, right? So anyways, Mount Olympus though is also home to the Gladiator guy. So this guy I've heard is really good to farm for Amber. He also drops a really good ring that is still good to this very day. So overall, you know, Mount Olympus isn't bad, okay? It's definitely not bad. I think it's honestly worth it to go through probably a few times. However, if we go over to the other dungeons here, okay? Atlantia, for instance, the level 70 and up dungeon, okay? So obviously, you know, you got like two main things here. You got the Sand Squid, which I have actually heard that it is good for farming Amber. So, I mean, this battle though in and of itself, super, super annoying. But if you want to farm for Amber, I guess you could do it here. I guess it's not a bad place, at least I've heard. So, that's probably the only redeeming factor though that I'd have to say about Atlantia. Like, this dungeon itself is just not enjoyable whatsoever. And oh, and honestly, guys, I'm not gonna lie, like, none of these dungeons are enjoyable whatsoever. Like, they were cool dungeons when they first came out, but honestly, at this point, they are a little bit petty for me, a little bit bit too petty and tedious for the gear that they drop, which just isn't very good, and I'll expand upon that thought later. But we've got Atlantia here, okay, the level 70 and up dungeon. So obviously you got Poseidon, who drops all of his Poseidon gear, and I'll talk about that in a second. Of course, the Sand Squid, which I guess is a redeeming part, like I said, but the whole dungeon of Atlantia, I have so many issues with it, okay? Obviously, this whole area of Aquila was meant to be a difficult challenge, right, for wizards, you know, at the appropriate levels that, you know, were willing to do them and everything. And of course the rewards that were promised, you know, were pretty great back then, you know, when it was first released in 2013, but this whole place is just not worth it to do anymore, okay? So for example, take like the Poseidon robe, all right, take the Poseidon robe for example, and then just compare that, and keep in mind it was released in 2013, right? Keep in mind, okay, it was released then, so take the Poseidon robe for example, which, you know, it's pretty decent. It's definitely better than like some bizarre gear or just some gear that you'd like, you know, get from just questing, you know, throughout, let's say on like your fire wizard or something like that, right? And then bring up the zigzag robe though, which you get 10 levels earlier than Atlanta, and bring up the waterworks robe, which you get 10 levels earlier from Atlantia as well. Atlantia is obsolete, guys. There's really no reason why you should be doing this dungeon at all whatsoever, okay? And you know, some people might argue with me in the comments down below, well, Phantom, you know, you gotta do Atlantia to get into Tartarus, or at least I think you do. So, Tartarus, guys, God, so many problems I have with Tartarus, honestly. And also Cronus, though, the secret boss in Tartarus, does drop like a decent theme, but honestly, that's not that willing to go for. I feel like it's just not. I feel like it's just not worth it, because, you know, in that 10 level difference, right, from between level 90, when you could actually equip the Blade of the Fell Titan, and the level 100, which you can equip the Morgantha Theme, I feel like there's just no contest there, so I feel like that's not very worth as well. And of course, you could argue that there's also better rings, or better alternatives to where you wouldn't have to fight the Gladiator either. Anyway, my main point being that Atlantia's gear is just completely blown out of the water by really the level 60 dungeons known as Waterworks and Zigzag. I'm sure you all know them, and literally they just make Atlantia completely useless and just totally not worth it to do, okay? And like I mentioned previously, of course, I'm pretty sure you need to do these two dungeons though to get into Tartarus, which is the big final like dungeon of Aquila, blah blah blah, the big finale to like the Immortal Games and everything, right? It's supposed to have really good drops and everything, but it just doesn't, okay? And like I looked back on this before, because my opinion for so long, like literally my opinion was changed about this like a few months ago, really. Like I changed my mind about Tartarus and Aquila as a whole and how it's not worth doing, okay? So anyways, Tartarus, all right, the final dungeon of Aquila. We've talked about Mount Olympus and how it's semi worth it. We've talked about Atlantia and how it's not worth it whatsoever. And Tartarus, honestly, I hate to say it, but it falls right into that category with Atlantia, where the dungeon is just too tedious and the drops just are not worth it, okay? So anyways, I'm just gonna give you like a comparison right now, all right? Let's just like of like the Tartarus gear, all right, compared to, let's say, the Darkmoor gear, right, which you get 10 levels, right? Only 10 levels after level okay, basically you get the Darkmoor gear at level 100, whereas in Tartarus you get your Hades gear 10 levels before that, okay? So overall, it's just not really a big difference. It's just a 10 level difference, okay? And the Tartarus gear is exponentially, I think it's exponentially worse than the Darkmoor gear, okay? Like, it's actually just so useless, and I'll give you a comparison right now. I'll just put like one up on screen so you could just see how useless it really is. And sure, like some people might argue like, oh, Cronus is a theme is pretty good, but I think I already just like touched on that. And oh, but Hades drops the Amulet of Divine. None of that's just worth it, okay? The Cronus one, there's a lot of alternatives to that. The Amulet of Divine, I mean, God, with amulets like the Shane Amulet and the, what's it called, Morgantha Amulet, the Amulet of Divine, you just don't need it anymore, and plus the drop rates are super low. Of course, it's still like a reliable thing, and I still use it, but there's just alternatives. There's just easier alternatives for it, to where it's just not worth doing whatsoever. So, Tartarus's drops are just not worth it either. Atlantia's drops are just not really worth it. Zeus's are just, I don't know, they're more worth it. It's just, you don't really have to do it. The game doesn't really make it essential in any way, shape, or form. So anyways, my main argument here, and you know, just relating to why Aquila is garbage and everything, is the whole place, guys, is just super outdated. It's just so outdated. It was released 7 years ago. And the gear just does not measure up really when you compare it to just the more recent dungeons. Although even Waterworks really isn't that recent of a dungeon, it's still better than a lot of this gear. So anyways, that was kind of my main argument about how just like all the dungeons were super obsolete. It just kind of makes Aquila as a whole, like all the recent gear, at least the more recent gear than Aquila gear that we have been getting, just kind of undermines it a lot, to where the tedious, long, and decently difficult dungeons are just really not worth it when you compare it to some of the later drops. So, of course, this kind of begs the question, how do you remedy it? You know, how do you fix, like, dungeons with gear that have been out for just 7 years when there's just so many better alternatives, right, that are even easier to get? Well, the thing is, honestly, this kind of is just my negative outlook personally, but I don't really think you can. I feel like Aquila as a whole is just kind of screwed at this point. Like, it's just not a very worth it place to go to. Of course, there's some, like, useful stuff here, but overall, I don't really think Aquila is just nearly as good as it once was. You know, with the release of new updates, you can kind of expect it, and it is a little bit sad to watch, like, one of the great, like, dungeon tyrants kind of just, you know, fall and just become outdated and such. But anyways, that's gonna be it for this video, everyone. Let me know if you guys agreed or disagreed with me in the comments down below. Are you equally disappointed with, like, Aquila's aging throughout the years? Let me know. Honestly, I'd really like to know, but make sure to leave a like if you guys did enjoy, or subscribe for more videos like this in the future. I post videos pretty much all the time, so if you enjoy the content, you know, consider subscribing. I feel like it'd be, you know, it'd be a real good decision, and you wouldn't regret it, I promise. Anyways, that's gonna be all from me, everyone. I will hope to see all of you guys in the next video or stream, whenever that may be. Take care, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day, and peace out.